So this activity is going to have you practice two major concepts. First thing that we're going to be looking at is analyzing literary text. Now, you're only going to be looking at one text piece today. You'll be seeing a second one tomorrow. The second practice is we're going to be making connections relating to heroism. And that's something that you'll be able to do relatively quick with the piece that we read today. So we've got a strategy that you should have practiced at least twice in 7th grade. It's called the TPCAST strategy. It's only used for poetry. You don't use it for any other literary text. It's solely for poetry, and it helps your analysis be a little bit more thorough and clearer, because poetry can be a bit tricky to look at. So what we have you do now is go ahead and turn to page 56 and 57. And you're going to see at the top of page 56 the poem that we're reading. It's titled A Man. Now, before we read it, we're going to make some markings in the actual analysis structure, this TPCAST chart. So you are going to want to use a highlighter. And within the chart, for now, you're only going to need one highlighter. But when we get to the actual poetry read-through, we'll need two. All right? So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and highlight the key information about how you fill in a TPCAST. All right, so the first strategy or analysis is analyzing the title. And the whole idea there is for you to predict solely by the title of the poem what you feel the piece will be about. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, I want you to make a very quick prediction about what a man may encompass, and do not use the phrase a man in your prediction. That's a cop-out if you did. Do your best not to peek through the poem. All right, now the next part of the analysis is P for paraphrase. So instead of reading that whole chunk, the only thing you need to focus in on is that paraphrasing is briefly summarizing the poem. Now we can't summarize the poem until we read it. So we're going to go through the remaining analysis pieces for the rest of this strategy. All right? So page 57 is the remainder of the chart. It's pretty large. And I know on my screen it looks relatively small. So do your best to follow the markings that appear on the screen. But if you can't see them, just listen, because I'm pointing out what it is you need to highlight. All right? So within connotation, what we have to do for this strategy is highlight the diction that's used for positive effect with one color and negative effect for a second color. After you highlight, you need to determine whether there is a pattern, and then you record your analysis. So considering that we're using two colors to locate the two types of connotation, I want you to go ahead and develop a key, like you see on the screen, and set one color aside specifically for positive diction words and one for negative diction words. If you only have one highlighter, use one highlighter for one and use your pen as another color. There's nothing wrong with that. I also want you to go ahead and set up that box for how we will fill in the information. Okay, the first part of the TPCAST analysis is A, attitude. And here you're locating how a speaker feels about the subject of the poem. Once you know that, you highlight words that convey the tone. And last, you summarize what the tone is. Now, for the sake of this poem, I'm providing you with the speaker. The speaker will be this person known as the man. A name never appears. He's only known as the man. Okay, shift is the fifth part of the TPCAST analysis. And what you have to do here is you have to identify shifts in either the speaker, or the setting, or the subject, or the tone, or images. And occasionally, there's more than one shift. You'll end up marking the text, and you'll explain the shift. Now, I did put a little note about what a shift is. A shift is a change. So if that term is throwing you off, don't let it. All that shift means is change. Okay, the sixth part of the TPCAST analysis is T again for title. And for this, you have to determine the deeper meaning. Now, the poem that we're reading, A Man, it's a very, very vague title, but there is a reason why the author would give it such a title, and that's what we're going to have to uncover. And lastly, theme, this is pretty nonsensical. Determine what is the message about life. Determine the theme. So the remaining components of the TPCAST, the 6 remaining boxes, we're going to be filling in the chart after we read through the poem. So I'm going to ask for a few volunteers here when we are ready to read this poem. So hopefully if you're going, ooh, I kind of want to read it, you're ready and willing to. With the poem, there are 2 kid cues that we're going to answer, so I want you to go ahead and set up your mind notes to put those answers down. I will be providing you with information for you to copy for these 2 kid cues. I'm going to go ahead and read this poem first aloud to you. And then the second time it's read through, I'm hoping to have 2 of you willing to do the reading part. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look first at A Man by Nina Cassian. While fighting for his country, he lost an arm and was suddenly afraid. From now on, I shall only be able to do things by halves. I shall reap half a harvest. I shall be able to play either the tune or the accompaniment on the piano, but never both parts together. I shall be able to bang with only one fist on doors, and worst of all, I shall only be able to half hold my love close to me. There will be things I cannot do at all. Applaud, for example, at shows where everyone applauds. From that moment on, he set himself to do everything with twice as much enthusiasm. And where the arm had been torn away, a wing grew. All right, let's take a read through one more time. 2 individuals, all right? Michael, Logan, I'm going to have you work together. I would like one of you to read the text that is not in quotations, and the other to read the text that is in quotations. Decision made? All right, gentlemen, go ahead and present your version of A Man by Nina Cassian.
While fighting for his country, he lost an arm, and he was suddenly afraid.
From now on, I shall only be able to do things by halves. I shall reap half a harvest. I shall be able to play either the tune or the accompaniment on the piano, but never both parts together. I shall be able to bang with only one fist on board, and worst of all, I shall only be able to half hold my love close to me. There will be things I cannot do at all. Applause, for example, that shows where everyone is possible.
From that moment on, he set himself to do everything with twice as much enthusiasm. And where the arm had been torn away, a wing grew.
Thank you. All right, now there was a reason why I had 2 people read that, because I wanted to point something out to you. Obviously, there's two different people speaking in this poem, but who might they be? What are you thinking, Elijah? There you go. We have a narrator and we have a man. We don't exactly know who a man's name is, but what I'm going to have you do next is go ahead and identify where we have these two very separate speakers. All right, so I have brackets on the screen right now with the letter A, and that's going to represent our narrator. So our narrator opens and closes this particular poem. But the bulk of the reading is completed by our speaker, letter B, who is the man. Now, throughout that dialogue of that chunk labeled letter B, where the man is speaking, we realize that this man, he has only one arm. He wasn't born that way. He was used to having two arms, and he lost one. And he keeps saying some interesting words. Half hold, cannot, half this, only this. What's he kind of insinuating about his circumstances? Is he happy about it? No, obviously not. So, what is he feeling? Fear, maybe? What else could he be feeling? What are you saying, Michael? Helpless. Anything else? Anger. Back and forth. There were some issues here. So that's going to bring us to our first kid cue. So, Elise, could you read that first key idea and detail question?
What was the dialogue reveal about the man?
All right, now you don't have to copy this down, but I'm just providing it for you as an example. So if you want to copy it, you're more than welcome to. Now, the dialogue doesn't reveal that the man is a veteran of war. That's what the narrator tells us before the man speaks. But this man's language that he uses, he's letting us know that he believes his quality of life is not as wonderful as it once was. He's using all these negative, connotative pieces of diction. Half this, half that, only this, either this or that. Never, cannot. He's negative. Not exactly positive about this situation. And you may have noticed right below that key idea and detail question, I wrote line numbers. I would suggest copying those down for yourself just to make things easier later on. Now the second key idea and detail question is a little bit interesting. Owen, could you read that second key idea and detail for us?
Is the idea in the last stanza meant to be taken literally or figuratively? What is the connotation of it?
Thanks. All right, so real quick, what is literal language? What's literal language, Jordan?
I mean, 100% mean what you're saying.
100% mean what you say. It's actually happening. In figurative language?
Where you're implying something that maybe like over-exaggerated.
Okay, you're implying something that's over-exaggerated. See, folks know the difference. Now, what they're talking about in this last stanza is the idea that the man has a socket that now bears a wing. Folks, is that literal or figurative? Absolutely figurative. But now what you need to think about is the connotation or emotion associated with the wing. So let's think for a second. What objects have wings? What do you think, Elise? Birds. What else? Angels. All right. Now, what emotion do you associate with a bird with wings? What emotion might you have there? Freedom, being able to fly. What about an angel? What kind of emotion might you associate with an angel?
Harmony.
Harmony. Joshua? Peace. What do you say, Santiago? Same. Ever heard of a guardian angel before? Now, what's the point of a guardian angel? What is their purpose?
To protect.
To protect. Do they do anything else?
They guide.
They guide someone. They can be a beacon of hope as well, right? So what I'm going to provide for you now is a possible answer for number 2. I know that box is kind of in the way of the screen, but you'll probably be able to figure out what it says. Now, you told me that the last stanza is absolutely figurative. We know this man cannot have a wing sprouting out of his pocket unless he's a very odd science experiment, which, sci-fi has proven for us. But the connotation of this idea of a wing, you brought up the point of freedom, if the wing was from a bird. You're bringing up the point of being a beacon of hope, of being guidance, of being safety as a guardian angel. So he's becoming this figurative angel. He may have been in this really bad position, and he may have felt very badly about himself in this situation. But instead of pitying it forever, he becomes this figurative beacon of hope. And I may have lost my arm, but I'm going to do things with twice as much enthusiasm and prove to people that, hey, if this happens to you, you can overcome it. So now you've got this whole plethora of information. And now we need to go ahead and complete the TP-CAPS analysis. So at the bottom of page 56, we now have to look at the paraphrasing component. What you need to do now is go ahead and briefly summarize what is this poem about. You don't have to tell me, you just write it down. If you want to talk about it with your group for a moment, that's not a problem. Now, the third part of analysis is connotation. And this is where you folks are supposed to develop a key using 2 different markings. So what I want you to do first, we're not going to write anything down, but I want you to look with your family and using your key that you made, find where there's words or phrases that have a positive connotation and a negative connotation. Start from the beginning and work your way down through the poem. Go ahead. So now I was just having you look for the poem. You weren't writing anything down yet. Okay, now I'm just going to show you a really few examples. I didn't go through the entire piece. I only did just a quick version of it. So yours probably has something very similar to mine. So my negative connotative phrases I put in blue. My positive connotative phrases I put in green. Now we are supposed to identify for connotation what was positive and what was negative. We're supposed to identify a pattern. So if you look at your example, or even looking at the example I've provided up front, just by the colors alone, what kind of patterns do you see? Not even the words, but just the colors. What pattern has appeared? What do you see, Jordan?
A is positive, while B is negative.
A is positive, while B is negative. Speaking of the narrator versus the man. Think of where the negatives are compared to the positives in the length of the poem. What do you see, please? Very good. It starts off negative, but it turns positive. So we've got a pattern between the way that our speakers are describing the situation, and we also have a pattern in terms of the layout. So what I need you to do now is go back to your connotation strategy on page 57, and I want you to go ahead and list down some of the words that you saw as positive and negative connotations, but also write down what that pattern was. Give you about a minute to get that going. If you want to talk out some ideas with your family, you can. You don't have to, but if you want, you can. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the 4th step. Okay, now the 4th step is titled Attitude, but it's referring to tone. So what we had to do here were 3 items. First, we had to figure out what was the speaker's tone. Then we have to locate words that convey the tone. And finally, we have to summarize it. So who was our major speaker that we identified in the chart earlier? Who was the major speaker? The man. He took up a real bulk of the actual poem itself. So what I'm going to have you folks do is go ahead and put this sentence frame into your tone summary section. Now, we could easily spit out a tone word, but what I want you to do is I really want you to pinpoint what specific tone this man felt using your tone and mood wheel from your raw notebook. If you don't have it, be willing to share with someone who perhaps does. That way you folks can get some better ideas.
So,
Once you find a really solid tone word, go ahead and fill the rest of that sentence frame. What are some tone words that you're going, oh yeah, this is awesome, this is totally fitting this man's disposition? Inferior. The man's tone is inferior. Close. The man's tone is powerless. Michael?
vulnerable.
The man's tone is vulnerable. These are great terms. Another one, Claire? Empty. Victimized. And these all stem from what was the major, boring original tone word? Like sad or scared. All right, now I'm going to have you go back to page 56. And I know it says to highlight the words that convey tone, but what I'm going to have you do instead is circle them. So what were the specific words that you pinpointed that made you go, this is why the man feels this way? Because he said this term or this term. You might notice that some of the markings you're making are repeating what you did for the initial connotation analysis, and that's okay. Last thing we've got to do, according to the direction, is summarize the tone. So here's your sentence frame for you to use. Now, be careful with your response here. The man, even though he takes up a chunk of this entire poem, there was more to it than just his verbal discussion. So the overall summary of the tone of the poem may not just be one word fits all. You might have to think it out a little bit more. So take about a minute or a minute and a half. You might want to discuss, okay, what could we use as a real positive answer that covers the bracket of what happens with this poem? Let's go ahead. I've got some people choosing to write one tone word, and I've got some people that are writing down two. They're saying, well, it starts in this way, but it ends this way. If you have to only choose one tone word to really describe the overall poem, what do you think would be the best fit? What do you say, Victoria? Why do you say hopeful?
Because, combined, at first it was oh, no, I can't do it, but then after it was no, you can do it. So, combined, they're, hopeful.
So, yeah, it starts one way, ends another way, but you're bringing the idea home of, well, there's hope. At the end of his journey, there's hope for things to get better.
Optimistic.
Optimistic. And did you think the same way as Victoria did? Hey, it started this way, but really ended this way?
He turned something bad into how he could use it positively.
Nice. Turning something bad into making it a positive situation. That's great. All right. Now, the fifth one is the last one where I'm going to be providing you folks a frame. So the fifth analysis is you looking at shifts or changes. All right, and this one is also kind of, you got to do a few things at once. All right, so first thing we have to do is identify the types of shifts. And there are 5 options of shifts: speaker, setting, subject, tone, or images. Now, from that list of 5, there's really only 2 noticeable changes out of those 5. So out of the 5, which 2 do you believe really fit the bill for this poem? What's one significant shift that you see? What do you say, Jacob? Speaker, 100%. So what I want you folks to do is copy that frame real quick. Speaker, blank to blank. And there's one other really significant shift. What are you going with, Joshua? Tone, 100%. Okay, so you folks know that there was a shift in speaker and tone. Okay, but the other thing is we had to mark where these shifts happen. So underneath those 2 kind of brackety looking things, I'm going to have you put those 2 sentence frames as well, between lines blank to blank and between lines blank to blank. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to fill in what response would fit best. So who was the speaker and how did it change? What was the tone and how did it change to a different one? And if you look at page 56, by the poem, you'll see 3 blue numbers, 5, 10, and 15. Those are your indicators for lines. And you also probably wrote a few other lines in the My Notes column. So I want you to take, let's say, no more than a minute and a half to go ahead and fill in that chart about who were the speaker shifts, what was the tone shift, and where did it occur. You can talk it out with the family if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. It looks like a good chunk of you are done. If you're not, just hang there, get it done. The last 2 parts of the TP-CAST analysis, they're pretty simple, and I just give you a quick little question versus a frame to help you really fill these in. So what we have to do is we have to determine what was the deeper meaning behind the title. So I pose a question for you to answer, so you can fill in that analysis. Why would Cassian choose to title this poem A Man, being very singular, instead of choosing the men? Or why would she choose a big term, A Man, versus his title of being a soldier? Okay, and last but not least, probably what I feel to be the easiest is theme. What could every man or woman learn from that man's experience? All right, so take a couple minutes to go ahead and fill that information in. Again, if you want to talk it out with a partner, you can.